I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. In our ongoing coverage of the BC election, I'm here with Warwick Sears, NDP candidate for Kelowna Lake Country Coldstream. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Yeah, that's so why don't you start off and just tell us a little bit about your background? I think I know a little bit about that. You've been involved in the Okanagan Basin Water Board for quite a while. Maybe share a little bit about your history and why you decided to come into politics.
Yeah, so I've been the executive director of the Okanagan Basin Water Board for about 18 years. And the water board is a famous Okanagan institution, but it is a partnership of Okanagan local governments. So the board is made up of mayors and councillors and regional district directors. And the goal is to work across the jurisdictions and look at what the common problems are, come up with solutions that work for all the different communities. So it's focused on water infrastructure, general water issues, but a lot of it is advocacy on behalf of the local communities up to Victoria. So while we're talking, working out conflicts locally, we're also trying to come up what is the common thing that we need to tell Victoria or Ottawa? What do they need to know about us, and what do we need them to do for us? So this has been a really big part of my job, is having those kind of conversations. And I was asked to run because some of the local leaders in the riding, they wanted to have a really strong representative because they saw that there was a lot of issues in the riding, and they wanted somebody who had a really strong voice and was going to be able to articulate what their needs were. And they asked me to run, and I thought, well, yeah, this background that I have of already knowing how to
you know how to work with the bureaucracy, right?
I mean, that's the bureaucracy and the ministers.
Yeah, so I mean, it's part of that because a lot of people don't even realize that the Okanagan kind of lakes is kind of like a river system, right? And it flows all the way from Cal all the way down into the Columbia River, right? And it's kind of this really kind of unique situation, and we do have, we're lucky to have such a aquatic paradise, really, right?
Really, it's fabulous. And so, yeah, I'm the executive director of the water board, which is from Armstrong to Osoyoos. I'm also on this international Osoyoos Lake Board of Control, which is a international water diplomacy kind of entity.
Right.
To help
so that
keep
the
the
gate
peace between,
basically, right? So how much water because I don't think we've ever had a treaty where we said we have to deliver X amount of water. Yeah. It's kind of on us to kind of say if we're trying to be nice neighbors, right?
So it's under the International Joint Commission, and their mandate is to prevent and resolve international water conflicts.
Right.
So we potentially could be sending huge amounts of flood water down onto Oroville, or conversely, in extreme drought years, we could be making it hard for those Oroville irrigators to be irrigating their
and
trees.
I think we've gone through, we don't want to say too much on water, but we've gone through light snowpacks, heavy snowpacks. We've had those floods a number of years ago with Mill Creek spilling its banks and all that stuff, and then we've had we've existed in some drought situations and a whole bunch of different things. I think water is one of the biggest resources that British Columbia can claim worldwide. We have so much fresh water in British Columbia.
Yep.
And I would say, this leads me to my question, we have so much fresh water. We also have so much forestry. I think if you looked at British Columbia, you would say water and forest, right? And I think, in my opinion, water is being managed very well. I think, can it be better? Sure, it can always be better. But our forestry, I think, is pretty close to in shambles, right? And we've had, even David Eby admitted when I interviewed him, there needs to be more. And a lot of that relates to climate change as well with wildfires, right? Because they tie together. And the Okanagan suffers so much from some wildfires, and our tourism suffers because, we get that nickname, Smokanagan. And how do we fix forestry? What's the NDP's path forward? Because according to Rustad and Falcon and some of the mills and that, the executives in the mills, they're saying that the NDP has treated forestry like it doesn't have a place in British Columbia.
I think that might be pushing it a little bit too much. I think what I have heard that is a big priority for the NDP, not just in forestry, but in some other areas too, like agriculture. A really big priority would be to do more value-added stuff. Like, it's stupid to be sending raw logs out through Port Alberni out to Asia or wherever. We can do, if we are having trouble with mill towns, we should be having them do more, creating more boards, creating more finished products.
Yeah, so I've had that discussion with both the forest minister and with Brenda Bailey, the jobs minister. And then she said the exact same thing you're saying, but I would argue that sawmills themselves are a value-added product because it goes straight into the walls, into the houses we need to build, right? Like, I mean, we're not shipping the raw logs away there. But we've closed so many sawmills in the past little while. We've lost 20,000 jobs, right? So, like, Merritt had a bunch of mills. They have none operating right now. We closed, Canfor stopped its capital investment in Houston. They shut the mill down in Bear Lake. I mean, we're seeing these. Canfor is a great British Columbia company, right? It's founded in British Columbia, but they said they can't operate in BC because highest stumpage rates are in British Columbia, and Alberta's booming, right? So I hear the excuse too that it's tough everywhere, but it's not tough in Alberta. They have the same type of force.
Yeah,
right?
I can't really speak to stumpage rates, but I know that there is a ton of work going on in BC. A lot of innovation, looking at different types of products that we can make out of the boards. Maybe the trees aren't as big as they used to be. There's a lab in UBC Vancouver where they're looking at making different types of beams out of
laminate beams and all that. But again, the forestry companies, like the sawmills, are saying we can't get access to fiber. We cannot get access to fiber.
And yet the mountain is so full of fiber.
Correct.
From the way of historical management practices that we actually need to go in there. This is what's happening up in the North Okanagan, is that Tolko is going to go in there and do a fuel load reduction, bring out a bunch of fiber, send it in for fiber processing, because we have to reduce the fire risk.
We have
around
to mitigate
the
that, absolutely. But Merritt,
there's things that we can do that are complementary, especially in these dry interior forests. We absolutely have to reduce some of that fiber up there on the mountain.
But there's a documentary out of Merritt, and they say they can't even get permits to cut pine beetle kill forest or burnt forest. And I did talk to David Eby on that, and he said, yes, Jim, we have a problem with permitting. And we need to fix that. We need to fix that in a hurry because, again, the Okanagan suffers through forest fires. And we've seen it, we can just look out the window here and we can see that, there should be some mitigation efforts taking place. And everybody's talking about that now, which is great. Like, even, the NDP are talking about it, John Rustad's talking about it, that we need to find a solution for forestry.
So I was working with the City of Vernon, Greater Vernon Water, District of Lake Country, about lobbying the government to do this fuel load reduction. So working with Okanagan Indian Band, they got a $15 million grant for 3 years to
David Eby did point that one out. He did say that there's some good stuff happening there.
And that this will include long-term forest management plan, working among the different communities and the Okanagan Indian Band. So I think that's going to be kind of a pilot project to see how that works between Tolko, who's going to be doing the fuel load reduction, the local communities, and trying to bring them, coordinate with the Ministry of Forests. So, I'm an optimist. I think it sounds like a good place to start.
Moving on to candidates and accountability. We seem to be struggling right now to get candidates to forums. We seem to be struggling to get candidates to do some of the interviews and stuff like that. It seems to be like a playbook that they're kind of utilizing, and it's not. I mean, we see it seems like there's some candidates that speak and some that don't. What's your thoughts on that?
Having lived here for a long time, and not this is the first time I've run for office, but I've certainly worked with a lot of politicians from different parties and local and senior government. It seems really unusual to have people not showing up and not coming to interviews. Like, I always think of politics in the Okanagan being about relationships and who you trust. Like, the last person elected in this riding was Norm Letnick. He was on the city council before that. Everyone knows Norm. Everybody trusts Norm. They know basically what he's going to do, whether or not they agree with particular policies that the BC Liberals were putting forward. Same with Tracy Gray. She was on the city council. She was chair of the Okanagan Basin Water Board. People got to know her, and so they elected her based on what they knew of her and the trust of her. Right now, if you have candidates, they're coming from away, or candidates that don't really have a public profile, and you're asking people to just vote for them based on brand or how they look on a sign or something, it doesn't seem right, and it doesn't seem consistent with our local Okanagan culture and how we do things.
Yeah, I know it's really kind of, we're doing a really big piece on it, actually. Ian Burns, our managing editor, is doing a really big piece on it. He's interviewed probably like 6 or 7 people, including media experts and all that stuff. And part of that he blames on Bill C-18, because media is becoming, people get a lot of their media from Facebook, and it's not, so that, like they're saying, well, it's maybe not as relevant anymore. And you know what I mean? So, I mean, that's not great for us, but I'm just saying, like, it's a whole bunch of stuff at play, and we're seeing some of the stuff play out in the U.S. too, because that's the big platform, right? Where we have, one candidate that's not really attending media, you know what I mean? And they're just like, well, it's working for her. And so I don't know if it's part of that, or we have inexperienced candidates, but I think voters deserve to hear from their candidates, right? Because it just seems odd to run on brand.
I agree totally, and a lot of people have used the analogy of a job interview. So if you running for office is really like a very very
right?
long job interview.
It's your only shot for the interviewer.
That's right. So there's multiple interviews and different stages that you go through, and the voters, the citizens, need to hear your voice and your thoughts to be able to make an informed choice. And so it's like applying for a job and then not expecting that you have to interview or do anything.
And that's why these 30-minute interviews I really like, because you can see if the cracks start to appear. Do you know what I mean? If the candidate has a grasp of what's going on, or if they're just a paper candidate. Because I think all the parties have kind of put out a few paper candidates when they're trying to fill some holes. And I mean, I could name them, but they're on all 3 parties. I think that's the case, right? I watched the debate last night, the leader debate, and I thought it was pretty poorly run, and it just seemed odd, right? And it just seemed really odd that it would be that kind of like, it didn't give, as a British Columbian, it didn't give me comfort to watch, and I didn't think anybody kind of stood out there, and you know what I mean? Like I thought everybody, Sonia played the role of like she told both of them that they were bad and stuff like that, but if it was the United States, she wouldn't be on the stage, because she doesn't even field enough to form government. So they would say, why is she even there? I like Sonia a lot. She's great. I think she's got lots of great ideas, but it just seemed to be a lot of noise, right?
The thing is that fundamentally they say all politics is local. And I think that local is how we understand it. Whether or not somebody's running for local government or provincial government or senior government, we want to have that local sense that somebody is really representing us and people understand what our local issues are.
One of the bigger issues locally here, and especially in the interior, is healthcare. It's been a really tough issue, and we do the press releases steady on it. All of our emergency room closed in the mid 30s from January to now. Like that's 30 in the 35s, I think. I don't have the exact number because it changes all the time. And then there's some in the north that they've closed emergency rooms and told people that they can drive up to 400 kilometers to get, which is a basic, just terrible. Like you've been in the water industry, everybody should have basic water, right? Do you know what I mean? Like we're telling people like, hey, you can drive 400 kilometers, like, if your legs cut off in a forestry thing, like it seems unreasonable, and it seems, and if we want to talk about accountability, we've reached out to Adrian Dix many, 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 many times, and he will not do an interview. And I think people in position of power, especially the health minister, I would say, had the number 2 position in this province. He used to be the leader, right? They need to be accountable. And I also believe all these candidates that are running need to be accountable to the public, and they need to show up at maybe if not a forum, do interviews, but speak to the media, because I don't ask the questions for Jim, right? We ask the questions for the public. That's the role we serve, right? We're not here for ourselves. We're here to serve the public, right? And as you want to do is serve the public, right? So how do we get better at healthcare? How do we get better at accountability?
Well, both of those are challenging in different ways. I think that healthcare, my understanding is that there's really a global shortage, well, maybe not global, North America-wide shortage of physicians. We're competing with other provinces. Some of our doctors are going to the United States. We're trying to get international doctors to come here. There's a big shuffling that's going on. We're trying to get more international doctors certified for British Columbia. We're trying to train up more doctors. We're putting in a new medical school, trying to train up nurses. Sometimes those ERs are closing because there's not enough nurses, not because there's not enough doctors. There's a bunch of homegrown. How do you grow more of our medical professionals and then get them trained and get them out into rural areas? Plus, there are other things that we can do that can help the situation, which is one thing that David Eby announced last Saturday when I was up in Vernon. He announced that they were going to get midwives to do more because the midwives are trained to do things. Just take some of the burden off of the emergency rooms.
I think a lot of the burden, though, and even in the interview I did, David Eby, he said the federal government's immigration policy is daft. To continue to add, like if we already have a short housing supply, we already have a shortage in education, we have a shortage in healthcare, and if you add, 1.5 million people to Canada's rolls, obviously they need all those services, right? But we can't even provide the services for the people we have.
I think that what I have heard, and I'm not an expert in immigration, but what I have heard is that BC would like to have more control over immigration into BC.
I think the provinces should have it, but Quebec's the only one that seems to have it because I think Mark Miller said it doesn't really matter what you think, you get what you get.
Well, we definitely need more immigrants for a bunch of different types of positions. There's a bunch of skilled professionals from around the world. We'd love to have them come to Canada and fill some of the positions we have because we also have a job shortage. Yeah. But we want to be able to have the right kind of people coming and filling the positions that we need right now.
We definitely need some balance, right? Because we can't at the expense of the all for the the benefit of the few kind of thing, right? It's a tough thing. The healthcare is one that the mayor in Merritt's been very, very vocal, saying he lost 2 doctors to the vaccine mandate, and we ran the vaccine mandate way longer than anybody else did, right? And we still have some healthcare professionals that will not come back to work because obviously they're like they're still hurting or whatever, I don't know, but again with Adrian Dix, he needs to be held accountable for those things and answer those questions, at least to British Columbians, and say why, because the people in Merritt are suffering because of it, right? So how do you get those 2 doctors? It's hard to get any doctor to move to Merritt or Fort St. John, or do you know what I mean?
They're finding incentives for the doctors.
Yeah, for sure, but it's still hard, right? Because like if you're a young doctor, Vancouver and Toronto and Calgary seem a lot more attractive than Merritt, right? Do you know what I mean?
Especially like beautiful small towns with a gorgeous landscape, which some people definitely do.
Well, I know a young doctor very well, and he had a choice between, when he's interning now as an anesthesiologist, and you know what I mean. I think he had 9 places to choose from, right? And they weren't, they were all major centers, right? So, and it's tough to convince a doctor to do it. So we do need to find incentives for sure.
But I, with respect to people answering questions, I 100% agree that people should be coming to interviews and answering questions.
I think that's
I don't know what
everybody
being
works.
Accountable means, like how far you take that, but certainly responding to interviews should be
like a basic,
important,
right?
for a lot of different people. From different levels of government or whoever's making decisions and anything.
I believe the people, right?
I believe that it's important to be transparent. Yeah.
Tourism a big part of the Okanagan, like we have, and water a big part of that as well. And we have a lot of water tourism, right? So
playing in the lakes,
so the water tourism is a big deal for sure. Is it striking that balance sometimes between the large pleasure craft on the water, and I know the invasive mussels that you kind of like really try to make sure that there's checkpoints all over the place to make sure we're not bringing those, because once they get in, it's tough to get out. How big of a role and how much should government be involved in making sure that the lakes stay, that we can enjoy them. Plus, they're a vital part of our survival too.
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of different ways you could go with that question.
I'm asking the right person.
I think we have really some of the best water quality in the world right here in our lakes, and we're incredibly fortunate for that. And we have to do whatever we can to continue to protect it, especially from things like invasive mussels, but also from other kinds of pollution that you might get running out of a city or whatever. Boating traffic is extremely controversial, like how big of boats and where they should go.
Yeah, because there's some lakes in our chain that don't have motorized boats on them. I think Vaso Lake has.
Yeah. But one of the things that a lot of municipalities are doing is they're trying to have no wake zones like around water intakes, and that seems like a good compromise if people will, follow along with these buoys or whatever they're trying to do to protect the intakes, because I don't want to be drinking a bunch of silt because some guy wants to drive around. Because
the intakes are out there. There's a couple of spots that the city draws their water from, right? And I think Glenmore draws out there now too. They have an intake.
And West Side has got some.
So they're drawing from there too, right? So people don't realize that there's not a lot of filtration that goes on in the water.
Well, they want to. They actually a big push for the local water districts is to not have to do filtration, and they can get away with not filtering because the water is so clear.
Yeah. So UV.
I think the bottom line, so that I don't nerd out too much about water treatment, is just that we have to share and we have to be conscious about what the different people's needs and hopes and dreams are for the lake, and find some ways that we can all work together.
One of the questions that a lot of British Columbians are looking at is that the NDP has had the wheel for the past 7 years, and a lot of British Columbians are suffering. And we hear this over and over and over again. Like they can't afford a home, they can't afford groceries, carbon tax is hurting them. It seems like now David Eby is willing to listen on the carbon tax. And Sonia Firstnow, when I interviewed her, I think it was one of the first times she said that we need to switch the carbon tax to at the wellhead as opposed to at the pump where it's hurting.
I think that's kind of where David Eby's going as well.
So, but we're in this spot. It seems like healthcare's in a rough spot, forestry's in a rough spot, wildfires, climate change seems to be getting worse.
Why
inflation.
Didn't the NDP fix this like that already?
It seems like in 7 years, like it hasn't gotten better though. So why another 4 years?
You might have noticed that there was a great big global pandemic.
I have noticed. Clearly noticed.
That was very disruptive, and then that was followed by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which rocketed up the energy prices, and then there was a global inflationary cycle. The the Bank of Canada started raising interest rates. All these factors are playing in it, and whoever is in power, whichever government, is having to deal with this, and it's just things are coming at us from the outside, and then they're affecting how what the price of our food is. Right. They're affecting what the price of the gas is. They're affecting how many doctors we have. A lot of people got burnout during the COVID pandemic. It's affected our system. Plus, you have the demographics where a lot of the baby boomers are retiring. Somebody was talking about how there weren't enough long-term care beds anymore, or how the shortage of long-term care beds has gotten worse. I'm like, dude, we're looking at the baby boomers entering long-term care homes. It's very difficult to respond to that in real time as this is happening. So I'm not defending the government, but I'm also just wanted to put that all in perspective.
Yeah. So
any government,
I hear you and all that, and that message has been said over and over again. But then Alberta seems to be doing quite well. They're attracting a lot of British Columbians. We are having net outflow into Alberta. Housing prices are way cheaper. I know they got more access to land and stuff like that. And they're attracting the big tech sector. Like they seem to be doing better than British Columbia. How BC and Alberta used to be kind of like even, because British Columbia, they do have mountains too, because they have Banff and all that. But they used to be like the two kind of richest provinces. Right now, Alberta is kind of clearly in the lead.
Why do you think that is?
I think it has to do with just that they've really pushed and incentivized the economy. I think they've really. I think if we look federally, and a lot of this has to do with the federal. I think like I did an interview with an economist out of Calgary, and Kevin O'Leary has said we have the worst asset manager in Canada running the Canadian resource, because Canada is one of the richest resource nations in the world, right? And we just have a bad manager, and not all of this is the NDP's fault, but I mean. But Alberta's premier has been pushing back hard, right? Danielle Smith has been pushing hard and her policy is Alberta first, right? So I don't know if we're there yet. We have a really friendly relationship with the Prime Minister, and I don't know if it's really benefiting us.
Yeah, I think there are things that BC really has going for it. And I think that BC's economy is going to come back strong once we turn the corner of this economic cycle. I think a lot of the kids who move to Alberta are going to be coming home because they prefer it here.
Well, who couldn't? If you look out the window.
Exactly, right? As our industry picks up again, I think we're going to be humming.
So 30 minutes goes by really fast. That's 25, just like that. And now the last 5 minutes is for you. So I'll be quiet here. Anything you want to say to the people?
I mean, one thing that's really come up for me a lot running for office is this thing that you and I were talking about having that relationship with the people that you are electing, and electing people that you trust, electing people that you have proven that they know how to get things done. I think that should be a big priority among voters. I think that one of the concerns that I have with Conservatives coming in is that there's only 8 of the Conservative candidates, including Rustad himself, that have any experience in legislature, and they want to do a massive makeover of government from the ground up. I think it's going to be really chaotic. And I think people should think about that too, especially, people in the business community who want to have stability and certainty that whether or not you like the NDP's policies, they are stable and experienced and rational. And I have seen that they can really work with communities. That's what I've heard from local government. I heard that from Mayor Dias here in Kelowna, that he's gotten good work experience with NDP, working on some of the things like homelessness. I've heard that from Mayor Vernon and from the Mayor of Lake Country. So I think that, we can work with them. I'm a centrist, and I'm running for the NDP because I think that they will be best for our community at this time. And I've never joined a party before, and I feel good about my choice.
I think most British Columbians are centrists, right? I think so too. I would say that most, and this is what when I've done interviews with Russ, I think you need to move to the center, both, and you see EB moving to the center, right? Especially election. But my complaint with that is, why not before, right? Because here comes the election, everybody wants to listen, right? And all of a sudden everybody wants to move to the center because that's where everybody is. But I think British Columbians are in the center, right? So why don't we try to stay down the center?
So when you have people like me who are centrists, who are representing people of the Okanagan, joining the party, then that changes the party's composition.
For sure, changes the dynamics, for sure. And then Loyal, I had on just the other day, and he said he's a centrist too, right? So, but I think that's where most of British Columbians are in the center, right? Because I think most British Columbians have a really good social conscience, because that's why they live in British Columbia. But they also have, they need to put food on the table, and they need to get their kids to soccer practice, and you know what I mean.
Another thing that I don't know what you would call it. Certainly, the people's feelings about water in the Okanagan, it doesn't matter what your political flavor is. Everyone is very serious about the environment, the air quality, the water quality. This is something that is not on the political spectrum. This is something that we all share. And I think
it's a common value for sure, right?
It's a common value, and we have a lot of common values, actually.
Sure. I think we should look for what's common first.
Exactly,
right?
100%.
Yeah. So one of the things that I would like to stress too is that when you're out there door knocking, I'm sure you have been, is if you answer the door, and if it's an NDP person and you don't like the NDP, still listen, right? And if it's a conservative person and you don't like the Conservatives, I would advise you to listen, right? Because it's only
Don't worry, I like everybody.
it's only through learning that we get better, right? And we push each other.
Well, I've worked with people from every party.
Yeah.
I've worked with people over the years. I'm really coming at this from the point of view where I think that we have much more in common than we have different, and I want to fully represent the people of the Okanagan.
And there's a lot of good independent candidates out there too as well.
That's right.
And I think having candidates that will fight for their area is what's important for British Columbia as a whole. And again, young people, if you have young people in your home, educate them, have them watch the videos from KelownaNow, the long ones, the short ones. Kent does all the short ones. We do the longer format ones. And there's we do a ton of articles on it. We've interviewed all the leaders. There's so much there that you can learn from. Just listening to somebody for 30 minutes as opposed to like watching that debate, I didn't get much out of that debate, right? So
how are you going to do your research? Everybody says, I want to do my research. It's really important to have videos like this that people can do their research based on.
Yeah, so they can listen to you.
Exactly.
They got to know you for, you got to sit in the living room with, Anna Warwick Sears.
And Jim Check.
And my job is just to ask the questions that you want to ask. I mean, I get a lot of people saying, ask this question, ask this question. I mean, that's our function.
I thought your job was to ask the hard questions.
There you go. I try to be fair. That's what I try to do, right? So, but we thank you for watching KelownaNow, and don't forget to get out there and vote. It's so important to have your say on October 19th, and you can actually, advance polls are open, so if you want to get it, if you already know who you're going to vote for.
Open tomorrow.
Yeah, if you know who you're going to vote for, you can go do it right away, but if you're still wanting to learn, definitely learn as much as you can, and watch the videos for sure, and watch them over and over and over, and then the candidates are available. Like, you can reach out to them too, right?
Some of them are.
Yeah, there you go. And with that, we'll thank you for watching KelownaNow.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. KelownaNow, local, independent. News you can trust.